Zoom. Welcome to staff and thanks for the preparations of our material for the meeting and also for walking us through reports today. We will take a break at 11. If we're not finished by then, let's aim for it to be less than a 2-hour meeting. That's the goal. And as circulated, our strategy, operations and finance tikanga, if you did have some quite operational questions, it would have been great to have those sent through in advance, and we did have a couple relating to the compliance and enforcement policy, which we will address this morning as well. So item number 3, apologies. The Mayor, Councillor Glenn Cooper, has a leave of absence, Community Board Member Michael Moore, and we've got Kim Tahiwi from Ngā Hapua Otaki likely joining on Zoom. Can I have someone to move those apologies be accepted? Councillor Pravanov, seconded Councillor Halliday. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda? No. Public speaking time for items relating to the agenda? Doesn't seem to be any public speakers. Deputations? No deputations to the committee. 7 members' business, leave of absences. There are none, and matters of an urgent nature, also none. So item number 8, updates. First up, 8.1, update on Council's revised compliance and enforcement policy. We've got James and Laura. Welcome up to the table.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm actually going to hand over to Laura because this is a piece of work she's been doing for what feels like a lifetime, but it hasn't. And I'm really pleased with the product. It certainly articulates my desires as to how we operate as a regulator. Doing some study late last year, had the previous chair of the Regulatory School of Practice from Victoria University have a look through this, as well as some colleagues from central government agencies, and this reflects current good or best practice internationally as well. So, but hand over to Laura to take you through and then take some questions.
Thank you, James. Through you, Madam Chair. I am happy to take the paper as read, but what I would like to do is just run through some slides just to highlight the key changes that have been made to this policy and explain a bit more about what it is. If this works. Oh, see. There we go. So the purpose today is we want to provide this committee with an update on the revised compliance and enforcement policy that we use at the council to undertake our compliance, monitoring and enforcement functions that are granted to us through legislation. So it's an operational policy. It's gone to our SLT, our senior leadership team, at the end of last year, and they were comfortable with it and suggested that we bring it to this committee so that you can be aware of it and know that this new policy is coming in and what the changes are. So that's what we want to run through today. Okay, so as I said, it's about how we use the powers that are delegated to us through legislation, and we all know with great power comes great responsibility. So we did have an existing policy. It came about in 2018, and it only had a scheduled lifespan of 5 years. That was when it was up for review, so it came up last year. So we undertook that review, and we found that there were a few gaps. And when we looked at best practice that was emerging, we found we could make some changes. So I will run through briefly what those are. And as I said, it went to the senior leadership team at the end of last year. So we updated the principles. So we now have these guiding principles. The purpose of these is to keep us transparent. And this policy, although it's an internal policy of how we operate, we make it external facing so that everyone knows and has an expectation around how we will treat people when we go into this territory of things going a bit wrong and needing a bit of correction. So again, we'll be consistent, we'll be fair, we'll always look for evidence and try and turn that evidence into some sort of intelligence in our work. We'll be collaborative, everything we'll do will be legal, we'll be accountable, ethical. We'll always be looking for outcomes focus. So a lot of the time that outcome focus might be on the environment because it generally doesn't have a voice. So we are the ones that are trying to minimise any harm to the environment, and taking that on board and weighing that up when we consider our options with some actions that may be detrimental in that area. We'll be responsive and we will be effective in our work. So we'll try not to drag these things out. We'll try to find a pathway that's suitable and take it where we can. So this is the model that was based on our last policy. This worked quite well, but it had a few shortcomings. It really focused on the attitude of the person we were dealing with and their approach to compliance, whether they were willing to correct what they've done and how they go about it. What it didn't really look at is the harm that might have been created and the options around that. So we switched to this model in the new policy. And this one I like because you can see in the green is actually about positive behaviour. It's not all about punishment or punitive measures that you take. So actually some people do things really well. And we should recognise and reward that, should be our response. And we do that with dog ownership. If people pay their dog registration on time, then we give them a bit of a discount to encourage that kind of positive behaviour. And we need to enable people. You'll see the behaviours that the options we want to take at the top. We enable people so they need to know what they need to do to comply. If we do that well, then again, they'll be in the green area. And then you start to slip below the line and there's different options we can take around engaging with people, just letting them know they may have made a bit of an error they need to correct. We can educate and explain the harm that they are doing and that they need to fix it. We can also enforce, and that's where our powers and legislation come through. And full force, as we're talking about prosecution. So those are our options. We like to consider all these. We've added these factors at the side. So it's not just about how someone's behaving. There's a whole range of things we need to consider when we consider where to sit on that graduated scale in terms of our response. So we've expanded that, and that will come into our decision making and our options and pathways that we decide to take. Okay, so one of the things we've looked at as well is understanding what the definition of harm is. It's a very simple word, but it's actually quite complex to try and figure that out, particularly when there's things like the environment and cultural side of things. So our policy previously was a bit silent on that, so we've broadened it now to include the cultural and spiritual relationship of tangata whenua with the natural world as well. So that means we need to start engaging more and partnering and collaborating more to get that understanding between our officers and tangata whenua, and we've certainly started those conversations already, particularly around Otaki Beach, and that door's definitely open. So we also have to look at, because we've grown so much, if there is harm, what's the level of harm and what's our response? Because we're not resourced to patrol every block of Kapiti. We just can't. So we need to look at what's coming in terms of our complaints and decide what the risk is associated with it. And in terms of allocating our resource, obviously we want to target the more severe ones. But if you're at the lower end of the scale where there's very low likelihood of harm occurring and the degree of harm is also minor, then we may just note it, or we may just write a letter asking someone to make a correction, but we won't actively start a case file and do an investigation. But that will be up for our officers to make that call as to where they sit in terms of that risk matrix. Opportunities to strengthen decision making. We did notice in the old policy, when it came to the serious end of the scale, we needed 2 GMs to make a decision as to whether to start a prosecution. We've decided to expand that now and include a legal representative and also someone from our iwi partnerships group to sit on that decision-making panel, because obviously that's committing council to a significant amount of time and resource, and to make sure that we are justified in that prosecution. And also we will talk to our iwi partnerships group. If there's something, particularly in the environmental space, where there is an option to do reparation as part of the corrective measures, we would like to talk to them and just understand more what that could look like, taking into account a Te Ao Māori worldview. So definitely expanding and seeking more advice around our options when we make decisions on our enforcement pathways.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, can I just ask for a bit of clarity on that one?
Sure, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. When you're referring to requiring legal and iwi partners, you're referring to that internally, is that right? In other words, the iwi partnership group.
Yep, so iwi partnership group, and we will go to our internal.
No, that's absolutely fine. I was thinking from a wording perspective in the document, just make sure you are talking about iwi partners group
Yes.
So that it is clearer that it's an
Yes.
internal group rather
it
than
is
an
now.
external group,
Yep.
i.e. EV partners. It's only a small thing, but
no,
if
no.
people are reading the documentation, we could be asking that question, why are we always engaging with our mana whenua partners out there when we should be trying to... But in actual fact, that's not the case.
No, that's not the
Yeah,
intention.
that's cool. No, that's cool.
And finally, we have noticed that we haven't been doing, we haven't been able to report on compliance and monitoring as well as we should be. We do fill out an annual survey with the Ministry for the Environment, and we've had that data available, but actually we want to get a bit smarter and start grading this in terms of from significant non-compliance through to full compliance. So what we're going to do when we get complaints in now is have a field that our officers will fill out, and they'll make an assessment as to what colour and what grade this is when it comes in, and from that, once we get the data building up, we'll be able to start running reports and feedback to the committees what the level of compliance in Kapiti District looks like. So next steps, as we said, it's an operational policy. It's about how we manage our business. So it's owned by a council senior leadership team, and implementation will sit with the Regulatory and Environment Group. And any questions?
Kia ora. Thank you, Laura. That was really useful. Aware that there are some questions from the table, but also that there are a few people who are keen to kind of have another space to also talk some of this through. So potentially a half-hour briefing at some point. The questions might kind of lead towards that being the suggestion, but I just thought I'd kind of preface the fact that we won't be able to get into heaps of detail today, likely, but if elected members do have further questions that they want to dig deeper into, there can be that opportunity made, from my understanding, to have a 30-minute briefing or an hour or however long it takes. Councillor Coe.
Thanks very much, Laura. That looks like a really good and sensible framework that you've put together. The question I have is around the interface between regulatory and economic development. And we've seen a number of instances of this where there has been, to some extent, a conflict between the objectives in terms of regulatory and ED. So I could name, for example, the Bond Store, Kapiti Food Fair, perhaps Tuatara, maybe even going back to Te Urahi in terms of consents for building on the beachfront. So there is this tension, I guess, between those two things. And I just want to note that I didn't see in your document any reference to how we resolve those conflicts. And I think it's really important that we do that in some way. So I guess in terms of what Sophie was saying about having another briefing, I'm just looking for some comfort around how we connect these things up, because to have a siloed kind of blanket approach to regulatory within council may lead to some less than optimal outcomes in terms of the total range of activities that council undertakes. So I'm just keen to know how we can address that and make things a bit more joined up in terms of what how council approaches things.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that, Madam Chair. It's a great question, Councillor. We spend a lot of time in developing the relationship with our economic development team. A lot of time we have a navigator who works across both teams to try and increase the understanding from a business that might want to operate in Kapiti early in the pieces to the statutory things that they have to go through. Some of what you describe are the policy settings currently within your district plan, and as a regulator we can't ignore those. And one arm of council may support a development that actually does not comply with your current district plan settings, and that is the world, and that will get more complicated under this new government. So we do work closely together. It isn't always smooth. And there is an expectation that because one arm of council supports it, that will smooth the way and remove regulatory barriers. That is not the case. I have seen utter disasters in councils ignoring their own regulatory settings. The one that I would refer to is the National leaky homes syndrome that was $28 billion, where we ignored, councils across the country ignored what we knew were coming. There's a constant tension there, and we do work as closely with the ED team and manage expectation up front and try to be pragmatic in terms of what we hold the line on. To come back to Laura's point in the slides, it's the harm or the potential harm of the development, and we try to work through that, but there are sometimes bottom lines that one part of council has to say no or this way. So I don't think Chris is keen to talk to that as well.
Yeah, I do. I want to, I think, add to this to say part of the work that we're doing in our master planning that's coming through, we are going to be looking at how, and you are referring to the district plan there, how some of the settings we have, effectively what outcomes we're getting from them. So if I use the Bond Store as an example, currently their zoning is industrial, and they wanted to do a retail activity. So there's opportunities to think about how we manage that going forward. But what you just heard James and Laura sort of reflecting in there, and that is that they have to follow what's in place now. So it's I think we did work together to find a solution, but it's a bit sticky. So as we go through the master planning process, we're going to be looking at where are those issues and what do we want to do with them. So some of them we might want to change, some of them for other reasons we might say we can't. So we want to work through that. I can let you know that I've suggested to ED, so the Economic Development Kotahitanga Board, that they would inform in that discussion, so we can be thinking about what are some of the challenges we're seeing and how are those settings contributing to that. There'll be other things we cover, undoubtedly, but I think that's a fair point. And so hopefully, as we work through that, you'll see opportunities coming through to address some of those issues that have been raised. So we are looking at it, and I think it will help us prioritise what's most important to progress in our district plan changes as well, because that does take time to do. So just recognising those things.
But I just want to point out, I wasn't implying that we should set aside the regulatory stuff in order to let things go through, but it's really about how do we deal with those conflicts?
Yeah.
What's the process for that, and how do we
I think James
find
has
a
another
solution
response
that
too.
doesn't upset a whole lot of people, and you know, the next minute, you know, council's getting hauled through the, you know, all social media posts about how bad we are at doing this, that, and the other thing.
Or haul through the environment court or something. I'm talking about extreme. But look, a recent example is, and you're absolutely right. It's not about us being black and white and rigid, and I can hand on heart say our teams are solutions focused. But as recently as early this week, we met with the ED team on site, I understand, and walked through a site where an applicant is looking to do some things. We can wayfind some information, but we were being asked, does that comply with the Fire Act? And so we have to be careful around giving advice and being the regulator and signing stuff off, you know, so we can wayfind and striking that balance. It's in constant tension, it really is. And I want to reassure, I would be very disappointed if there was anybody in my teams that were just so black and white. I can assure you that that's not happening. They're trying to find solutions, and often that's what takes time, and that iterative process makes it frustrating for all parties as well. So
I guess all I'm asking for is that in this document there is some acknowledgement of that conflict, and how and the ways in which that might be resolved. And it doesn't need to be a big section, but just to say, hey, you know, we've got this policy here. We acknowledge that sometimes it's in conflict with other council activities, and we will make our best attempts to resolve those. Or I don't know what, you know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but just to acknowledge that problem exists.
thank you.
I think that's been noted, and really good point, Councillor Coe. Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I'll just quickly follow up on what Liz was saying. And the Bond Store is a very good example where we had two arms of council who were in conflict with each other. The ED people going, this is insane, and the regulatory people going, this is important. Right? And so one of the problems is for elected members is when we're out there, well, I know I do, I tend to agree with the person who just wants to get on with his business. And I find that regulatory environment can be strangling. So but you have to have one, and that's that, the educate or punish, or along a continuum. I thought the principles that you outlined were superb, and I'm assuming, just an assumption, that all departments of council are working on those principles. If they're not, I think it's worth having a chat and sharing those, because I think that would be really valuable. Obviously, Laura, you've done a huge amount of work on this, and I think there's other parts of council that would benefit from the same strategic approach. Anyway, what I did want to raise around that regulatory environment is, just as a country, as a planet, we tend to reward the wealthy and we punish the poor. And we do it here, but perhaps unwittingly. But if you pay your bill on time or early, we reward you. So if you've got plenty, you go in and you register your dog, and we go, good on you, rich person, have a discount. Poor person who doesn't register their dog, not because they don't want to or they're just being a pain, but they can't afford to, we go, guess what, poor person, you're going to pay more. And I think we need to think through some of that a bit more. It happens, actually, there's a few women in the room you might want to read. There's a book called Why Women Pay More. And on average, women pay more for the same services that men get. It's a fascinating book. You should read it.
So just to clarify your question,
So, no,
is
no, it's not a. No, it's not. It's actually not a. It's not a. It's not a question, because I'm just following the up there where it says questions and comments. So I'm focusing on the second
the
part
comments, okay.
of that. But if you
Take
do
it as
want
a debate contribution. If you do have a question, though, feel free to fire with that, and
Yeah,
then, or
yeah.
just James, do you have a response that you wanted to?
Yeah, look, take the councillor's point, and our staff are extraordinarily compassionate and will work. Take your example with the owner who can't afford to register. They will look at history, they will look at all those things, and they will work at a time to play and just keep people honest on that. Chris, you forgot to pay this week, or whatever it happens to be. Yeah,
Yep.
but there is that absolute compassion. But I take your point. Yeah.
Good. And this one's a question, actually. When we're talking about the parties in a regulatory environment, so how are we defining the parties? So, for instance, if we were to apply the educate or punish principle to, say, central government over Plan Change 2, and what they forced on substantial parts of our community who really, really didn't want it and expected us to go into bat for them. So do we exchange views with government departments, or do we just roll over on them? And say, for instance, and I know this is largely around environmental work, but this probably, again, applies across the board. So where central government are imposing things, I mean, we would take people who we thought were doing damage to the environment, we would, if they were completely recalcitrant about it, we would take them all the way to court and ask them to throw away the key. But if it's central government doing it, we go, oh, well, what can we do? It's central government policy. But I just wonder if we should be pushing back. But you, as a regulatory environment, it's really tricky to do, but under political direction, it's possible.
So I did just want to note that when new direction or legislation changes come through, obviously we have an opportunity to comment on those, and we do put forward concerns. Effectively, if legislation does allow for different conditions, and a good one is that, just as an example, central government doesn't pay rates. As an example, we have to follow the legislation that is put in place. So if there are specific things stated, we have to implement that. So I just wanted to say that point. We do have a chance to push back, and we do, I think. when we are submitting back on the changes that are made. And then there's the, once it's in place, what we do with it.
I just wanted to add to that too with our improved reporting and monitoring. One of those categories was the green one, which is full compliance. We are going to introduce a field that will allow the officer putting in why it's fully compliant, whether it meets the MDRS, the medium density residential standards that were imposed on us. So for example, if a neighbour rings up and says, why is there an 11-metre building going up on my boundary? We'll say, well, it's allowed, but we know it came from the MDRS requirements. So we're starting to monitor that and just get an idea of how these things are becoming compliant and being able to report back on what the impact that has had in terms of our complaints.
And just,
Was it another
last-
question,
Yeah,
Councillor
yep.
Wilson? Okay, really briefly.
Very
There's a
last
few more
one
people.
was just, Liz suggested this, so I think.
Oh, sorry, your
it's-
mic's not yet on, so we might just need to wait for that because you're a. Oh, I don't think there's anyone online, but yeah, there we go.
As Liz suggested, there is a real tension very often between economic development and the regulatory environment, and perhaps a workshop would be very helpful where we had those. We could put you in the middle of the room, the two groups, and just see if we can nut some stuff out, because there really does seem to be an ongoing tension and it's unresolved. And out there, as out there in the community, we hear it firsthand from businesses who are screaming, but the regulatory people will say, yeah, but there's rules, they're not there just for no reason. And so maybe understanding those tensions would
Yeah.
be helpful for everybody.
Yeah, I think everyone's in agreement that that would be a useful exercise and conversation to have. Kim Arohamai, I can see that you're on Zoom. We will just go to Deputy Mayor Kirby and then come to your question, and then we've got Jocelyn and then Martin.
Great, thank you. Really appreciate seeing this, which is obviously staff policy, not our policy to own. So I think that's the fact that we're seeing it is, I would say, is great. So thank you for that. Just a little short question from me. In our principles, we use legal, accountable, and ethical. How are we defining ethical? The reason I ask that question is I know within a society there are many people who operate on a different set of ethics. And I would suggest that even within your regulatory team there are people who operate on different sets of ethics.
Ethics are not morals.
No, I'm not. Yeah, no, I know.
Ooh, now we're really opening it up.
We're not having a philosophical debate. I'm
Yep.
just asking,
How is it defined?
how are you defining that internally in terms of acting ethically?
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Yeah, look, it is a great question. I think it's a challenge faced by all regulators, especially given the diversity. For me, it's around the values of the organisation and the values that we hold dear, what we see displayed around this table. And at the end of the day, there are some value judgments, but there are checks and, that the officers might have to make, but there are checks and balances to make sure that that is fair and ethical. But look, it's really difficult to define, but it's all of those things. And then you balance that against consistency, so it is a challenge.
Yeah, cool. So I take my hat off to you and your team for the work that you do in this space, because it's challenging, and you're dealing with people who get highly emotive, I guess, around their particular situations, and you're having to balance that with the rules. And yeah, and I do note in the report the increase that it's noted quite clearly in there, the increase of customer aggression around our enforcement teams. And so I was really happy to see this policy and to read it. So thank you. It's very comprehensive.
Yeah, kia ora, agree with that. Kim, we'll come to you now. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Hoping you can hear me.
Yeah, we can.
I'm just reading, and I'm looking at page 19. I think it's page 19. I haven't got on my screen. And when it talks about the mana whenua partnership, and so we've got two terminologies in there. We've got mana whenua, obviously through Tiwak, and then we've got Tangata Whenua, and the two are quite different. And I just wonder if we need to, or if we have discussed this with our mana whenua partners through the iwi partnership team, because I know in past, Andre from Atiawa has raised the point around the terminology that we use, and Te Ao Māori it means different things. And just to kind of put some context into it, there's a way in which mana whenua through tikanga engage mātāwaka or tangata whenua. So the two are not the same. And I just wonder if having both terminologies, if we could just get some clarity on the terminologies and the wording that we should be using, and what its purpose is for. That was kind of my only comment.
Yeah, kia ora, Kim. I think James will just respond.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. That's much appreciated. Look, it has been through our iwi partnerships team. We will go back and check that. We want to make sure that we are using the right terminology as we start to develop the relationship through our iwi partnerships team. So thank you for that feedback.
Kia ora, was that all from you, Kim?
That's all. And yes, good document. And I understand that when you're dealing with things like this, tensions can be high. But I do want to total call Councillor Wilson's point about unwittingly, sometimes we do these things of the people that are actually unable to pay. And so sometimes the symptom is that they pay late, but the issue is something behind it. So maybe addressing that as well, not just the symptom.
Kia ora, thanks, Kim, and nau mai haere mai Frank as well, who's joined us online from Te Atiawa ki Whakarongotai. Over to Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, James and Laura, for bringing this paper or this report to us, this policy. I suppose, and I certainly acknowledge that it is an operational policy, but I suppose my take on this as elected members, our role is a governance role, and we need to ensure that all our bylaws and district plan, everything else that we sign off, are being adequately enacted. And I suppose this is where the rubber hits the road. So I have a number of questions. So first of all, so I actually quickly looked at the previous document. It said that this is not legally binding. Is this the case for this document as well?
Yeah, through the chair, this wouldn't be legally binding. There are all sorts of checks and balances, both internally, but externally, judicial review, appeals to the Environment Court, so what you saw, 240 Kapiti Road. This is a guide, this is a framework for how we go about our statutory functions as regulator.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just note, Jocelyn, that we're shortly, through our new strategic architecture, going to clarify operational policies as a suite versus what I think you're thinking about as policies and bylaws externally that set the framework for the community. So this one is more about how we do what we do versus saying everyone does these things. It's a simple way to say that.
Yeah, but I suppose it's a case of where, I suppose, and I acknowledge that there's, in the regulatory space, there's so many different bylaws and policies and the district plan, how they can be approached. But I suppose it's a case of where we've heard from our communities that they want more monitoring and enforcement. And I'm not sure whether this is actually going to do that. And I suppose, to me, in some respects, there are situations where things are more black and white than others. For example, there are certain places on the beach where people can't drive. There are signs. And so it's a case of where, it's a bit like a speeding ticket. If you get caught, you get sent a fine and you either pay it or appeal it. End of story.
Sorry, Councillor Pravanov, I think Sean would like to respond just to that point there,
Okay.
maybe, or a previous one, and then
Okay.
we'll come to your next question.
Yeah, I just in terms of the history of this document, I guess in terms of if anyone remembers the stand-in tree, so we had issues historically where prosecutions were were taken forward or we engaged in that compliance process, and there wasn't a lot of structure around guidelines internally for staff. And with that particular case, it was an elderly couple, so the ethical element it brought into play a whole lot of other parameters that we felt as an organisation were important to consider before you entered into that formal prosecution phase. So that is really, this is an internal document to help guide us through that process. So it isn't directing us in terms of which things to apply enforcement to, or in terms of bylaw speed issues or whatever. It's really just where we go if we are having issues with non-compliance and things that we need to take into account when we're working through that process. So I don't know if that helps in terms of context. That's where it started from and evolved into a policy to help us navigate through that, because it is can be quite difficult. And as James has mentioned before, it's certainly an operational internal document to help structure that approach.
Thank you, Sean, and I agree that it's an operational policy and it's internal, but it's my understanding it's on the website, and so people will look at it, and so people will take from it whatever they like. And I suppose to me, it would have been nice. In fact, I would like to request a briefing on this before, so this paper lies on the table. But I suppose to me, to make it clearer, some decision trees about how you actually manage some of these issues. And I suppose there's a few other things, but I think the key thing is that I'd like to request that that we have a bit more time to talk about this in a briefing, please.
Yeah, through the chair, there's a couple of things there, Councillor. First of all, your levels of service discussion. There may well be parts of the community that want to see us doing whole lots more. There'll be equally as many parts of the community that go, you do too much, stay out of our business. But as we develop, particularly that environment strategy, there must be a piece of work that comes out of that around what we want to do in terms of monitoring, what our partner agencies like GW, what their roles and responsibilities are. So for me, there's a level of service discussion as we mature as an organisation, and as we get better at producing meaningful reports to you. I'm still aiming for quarterly, and so you can see some trends, useful commentary. So that's the first bit I wanted to respond to. Next month we are bringing case studies to you. I think we've got 2 hours. We might want to expand it just a little bit more, and talk to you some of the big ones that we've been dealing with, some that have gone well, some that haven't gone well, and in there you'll be able to tease this stuff out. I'm not sure how we would tailor a briefing, Councillor, to your question around decision trees. I'm not sure.
Well, this is actually
having
the
live
whole
examples,
policy. The whole policy I'm talking about here.
Having live examples would demonstrate the policy in action. I think might be more useful.
Okay, Chris will make a comment, and then Jocelyn, if you just have one more question, because we've still got a couple of others.
Yeah,
so,
thank you.
I feel, just following on from Councillor Coe's comments, James and I were just chatting about maybe using an example of the bond store just to show how our settings and the work that the team has done and kind of what happened internally to kind of smooth the pathway as much as possible, what that looks like. So you get a look and a bit of a feel for how, if you like, the puzzle parts are coming together. So I do think there's probably different concerns or issues that might be being tabled in different areas. So the environment being one that I think you've mentioned, and the other being actually might be more around building requirements and or zonings, and just understanding how that plays out. So I think that's what we're hoping to be able to share with you, if that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. So obviously this, it's a massive area and it's fraught with difficulties, and that's why I do, can we have a briefing on this before this paper, well, I suppose I see it's noting, but before this is actually signed off, please.
Yeah, I think if there is comfort around the table, seeing as the recommendation is solely to note that these changes are being made, if we can just get the paper over the line and then, as James mentioned, flesh out exactly what would be useful to have within some sort of a briefing or workshop or case study session, that would be really useful. But of course you do have the option of putting a motion to let it lie on the table if that's what you so choose. But I would encourage us to think about how we can do this most efficiently and effectively to get the right outcome.
Sorry, if I may just also note that I think, I'm going to say, maybe this has happened regularly, but for me, in the time I've been here, a new step is that it is on the table for you to look at. Effectively, this material will go to SLT, and Darren, as Chief Executive, will be signing it off as part of our operational framework. I think the briefing that we were hoping to have was to work through some of the challenges that we know exist and how we're managing them, and to link it to some of the upcoming work, as I mentioned, around the master planning, where we can actually start to tease out, do we need to make some subtle adjustments to some settings, or where can't we do those things? So, and how does that roll out? So hopefully we can cover off some of the things that are of interest through those upcoming processes. Did you want to say anything else to that, Sean?
Just, I don't know about labouring the point around, so there are the legal ramifications associated with compliance matters and enforcement issues, and again, delegation-wise, the Chief Executive signs off this operational document. So at a governance level, there are risks around having too much influence or impact in that space as an elected member, and that's why it's an operational document signed off by the Chief Executive, and isn't something that we would bring to council to sign off formally. And again, as Chris has said, have a briefing around the context around it, rather than making changes to the document or suggesting we might look at doing things slightly differently, starts to open up a bit of risk, I think, for you as governors, that again, it's the Chief Executive's role to sign this off.
Yeah, we'll just pass to Laura for a bit of comment, I think, from David, and then we'll take
I have one more question.
just last
Yep.
question, and then we'll go to Martin and Rob, and Nigel, we might have to leave your final question off if that's okay, and you can try to contribute it to debate. We'll see how we go. Laura.
Yeah, just some feedback that we did receive from David, one of the Davids. He did mention at the top of page 30 under elected members in the policy, and I'm comfortable to add something along these lines. He has mentioned, and this is about elected members' involvement in prosecution decisions, adding something along the lines of this is for information only on a no surprises basis, and is not providing an opportunity for elected members to comment to council or more widely on whether or not a prosecution should proceed. So just making that really clear, that divide, that there is a line between governance and management, and to cross that line can sometimes compromise the outcome, and that's something we want to avoid.
Thank you. Councillor Pravanov, last question from you.
Yeah, so I agree exactly what you're saying, Laura, but I suppose as elected members, we have got to be satisfied that the laws, the bylaws, the policies and the district plan that we have signed off are actually being implemented. How can we actually be assured of that?
Yeah, through reporting, regular reporting, and through escalation of something pops up that's out of the ordinary, you'll get an email from me, just giving you a heads up. For example, we have executed a search warrant for some animal control issues yesterday morning, in partnership with the police, who discovered 24 kilos of cannabis on the site. So a partnership is working, and where it's appropriate, I'll give you guys heads up on things that are meaningful.
I think though, with respect, so reporting is not actually
Sorry,
the
Councillor
action.
Pravanov,
Yeah.
can we
Okay.
take the rest of this conversation offline?
Okay,
Thank you. Councillor Halliday.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I've got 4 points here. First one, I picked up, for me, this is a direction of travel document.
Sorry, just to clarify, are these questions or
Bit of
points?
both.
Okay.
Okay, and they'll
Yeah.
be quick.
Yeah, cool.
This is from our perspective. We've had a couple of documents, movement strategies, direction of travels, and this for me feels that it's a bit of a direction of travel document, that you use as a guideline, and that sort of stuff. So I've got no issue around that. I appreciate that there is a rub between regulatory mindset and customer interaction. The reason I call that is in hospitality, we have a thing called Kiwi Host. We used to have a thing called Kiwi Host, which was which was giving us skills to deal with customers. And generally the community are our customers as such. But I do appreciate there's a mindset required for regulatory, which can lead to tension in that space. So I'm just wanting to know whether do we have training in that sort of regard in council?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, great observation, councillor. When I first come into regulatory, and I've done this in a number of organisations, who is the customer? And the answer I get, everyone's a customer. I think that's really, really lazy, because you have competing customers. So, we talked about this through my master's studies last year. We talked about a regulatory lexicon. You know, a customer who walks in the door to make an inquiry about a liquor licence is genuinely a customer. The minute they start to fill the form in, they become an applicant. And the minute they get their licence, they become a licensee with all of the responsibilities and accountabilities. So I think using the language and seeing the language change within the group, and understanding, you know, we issue a licence to Chris to run a 24-hour pub. The neighbours next door are impacted by that. So there's all of that tension. But using appropriate language, I think, helps and helps the mindset. So hopefully that gives, and that is a change that I'm seeing in the group.
Yeah, I guess I'm referring to the approach that's taken by the staff that are dealing with people in general. You know, this is not specific. You know, the chair put forward an excellent document around tikanga for our meetings, say for argument's sake. It's a very, very simple document which gives us basically a respectful process, if you like, when dealing with each other. That's sort of what I'm more referring to.
If I can just respond to that, through you, Madam Chair. So this policy is one thing. It's a starting block. We're going to build a compliance toolkit that sits under it, and that will be tailored to our individual customers as they move through different processes with us.
Cool. That's marvellous. I mean, you know, James, this is great progress. This is transparent. It's great. There's things that can be held to account through the process if it needs to be, as such, and things we can refer back to. So no, I think this is wonderful. Okay, that's that one. It's been tensions have been referred to. I think they're referred to by Nigel. Just want to make sure that that's not a negative. Tension's a good thing. It's just how it's dealt with. And that sort of stuff. So I just want to make sure that it's not being tagged by tagging tensions is not a negative connotation around this document. There is always going to be tension there. It's just how that's managed, and how it also connects with that wider picture, which I think some of that references to as well. Kim did pick up on the mana whenua, tangata whenua thing, and it's getting better, and that sort of stuff. But we've just got to be careful around there because potentially, if it does come to some sort of litigation, then terminology can potentially be used as well. I support a further briefing, but I actually take on board what was just being said about test case. I think it's a great process to start this conversation, because I think there's some issues there that we as governance are interested in getting into some meaty conversations around. This is not the forum for that, so quite keen to, and that'll be an ongoing conversation. It's not something that's going to be resolved in sort of one briefing per se, but I just want to thank the team for allowing that process to start to happen, and that sort of stuff, because it's been a little while coming, and it's good to see that we're getting to that stage of being able to get that interaction. So that's much appreciated from my end. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Halliday. Very succinctly put. Councillor Cofford.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question. We're not signing off on the district plan yet, are we? But okay. Just with regard to the building industry and the environment we're in, and it's getting more and more tense out there, as you know, the cost of building is soaring, and I'm finding myself that quite a few developers do their thing and they seek forgiveness rather than permission, and they come in for their codes of compliances, and it's one hell of a battle sometimes to see these unofficial building variations being done, and your team has to work through it, James, to you know, just to keep the peace and get the thing sorted to move on. But it's quite a, and I think this policy is a good pragmatic approach to a very complex problem. And your value judgments would be exercised, every day, and I thank you for that. I find the design guides at the moment relating to intensive development are a little bit open to, a little bit loose, causing a lot of these problems in the long run. It's just the definitions and interpretation of it, and we see these developments going up, and
I think Chris is keen to make a comment on that.
okay, right. Yeah.
I just want to say that, yes, acknowledged, and that is on the runway to be working through. And I'm, in our master planning, the boxes with our urban planning panel is well around that. So the guidelines, the panel, that's all to come. So I hear your point.
Oh, thanks, Chris, indeed. And I was just getting around to the urban panel.
Did you have any further
It's all there to
questions then?
assist. Yeah, thank you very much.
If that's already
so it's on the
covered
way.
off.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wilson, do you have a brief question?
Yeah, just
to round us off?
just quickly, a couple of things about the regulatory environment. Sean mentioned the Standen case, which was probably best part of 20 years ago now. That was a really good example of where there were a set of rules, but the cost, the reputational risk to council for applying those rules was huge. It was network news, and we looked terrible, actually, as a council. So there's that. There is there was a Vale development in Waikanae where they were actually selling properties without a resource consent, so that was another interesting one. But my question really is, and this is a takeaway thing, we're in the process of establishing social housing trust, quite possibly an economic development trust, a health trust, which are supposed to be kind of at arm's length from council. So I'm just wondering, have we factored in what the regulatory environment is going to be? Because they're going to be at the coalface of this stuff. And so how does our regulatory environment, I don't need an answer now because it's a fairly big question, I think. But what is the regulatory environment when you have got effectively what is supposed to be a third party, but we know that the ties are going to be close to that, and the main point for me is the reputational risk if they make a screw up.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor.
And through the chair, very briefly, those principles that sat across the top of one of the diagrams, engage, educate, those early part will be absolute paramount for a relationship with the CCO, because they'll still be bound by the same legal requirements as anyone else, but reputationally, absolutely take on board here.
So I just want to add to that and say, as we step through the stages of establishing these new entities, we will be talking about the connection back to council and the support they get. So I think James earlier talked about a navigator. There will be somebody here whose role is, it is separate to operational activities, so that they not they mediate in between, but they can make sure that the right conversations happen at the right time. So that is going to be part of what we talk to you about when we get into that relationship management framework, and how we make sure that we keep that connection at the right level, ensuring that we can do what our job actually is in spaces, but also ensuring the success of those entities as well.
Awesome. Not seeing any other questions. Just want to really thank you both, Laura and James, for setting the scene for what was a really useful conversation, I think, and obviously one where we need to be quite aware of the delineations in our roles, and also the purpose of this document and who it ultimately sits with. But I think it's been a useful chance to kind of tease out some of the questions and comments from elected members, and as Martin said, with more opportunities to do that, I think will only strengthen the appreciation for each of the roles and the challenges in the roles that we each hold. So it's been really useful. Is there someone who'd be happy to move the recommendation on page 6? Yeah. Councillor Warwick, seconded Councillor Cofford. Any debate? It feels like people debated in their questions. So if we can kind of somewhat... Okay.
My only comment is to echo, thank you for bringing it to the table, and I hope the discussion hasn't put you off bringing more.
Yeah. Okay, so that's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Aye. Against?
Yes, division.
Okay. Noted. So in favour? Raise your hand.
Sorry, so I've got councillor Coe.
Do you want me to pull it in?
Uh,
Councillor Cole, Councillor
yeah.
Kirby,
QB,
Wilson,
Wilson,
Spears, Warwick,
Spears, Warwick.
Halliday. Yeah, in favour. Martin, you're in favour? Yeah, and Coford.
And okay.
All right.
Do we do Kim
Yeah, you do. Yep. Yep. Kim.
and Frank?
And Kim, I can't see your. Okay, I don't think we have a vote from. Okay.
Oh, really? Okay. So
Oh,
then
Kim's in favour. Yeah.
Kim's in favour.
Cool.
Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 4,
9-4
and 1 against.
and 1 against. Great, thank you, Laura. Thank you, James. Appreciate that. All right, moving on to
Somebody keep
item. Yeah, I can keep that. Moving on to item 8.2, update on the Strategy, Operations and Finance Committee work program. Noting that any comments will be woven in before the final version comes back to us on the 16th of May. So this is very much just an update, giving us some oversight as to where the work program is at and how it's shaping up. And so, yeah, if there are any questions about its current status or things that are missing, then I guess now's the time to put them on the table, but we don't want to get into too much detail about how they're woven in. We can bring that back on the 16th. So pass to Chris to formally introduce and then questions.
Thank you. I will take the paper as read, but just to note for completeness, we've obviously attached the draft work program to your paper so that you can look at it. To remind you that the items in green reflect delegations for this committee. And we've attempted to put on the table currently what's proposed. There may be items of interest that you are saying, hey, where does it fit? I can't see it. Happy to take that feedback and come back to you with the final product. At the same time that we are landing this work program, we've obviously got the Social Sustainability Committee's work program and the Climate and Environment work program, and then there's council. So we're just trying to make sure we've got the fit right. But I think it's important when we're in April to be able to say we know where we're heading, and that is really the purpose of today's meeting. So look forward to any feedback you have. And just to note, it will be coming back at the next meeting. We're looking to be able to say, yep, we've got it right, and to lock it in. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Chris, and appreciate all your work pulling this all together. It's awesome. Councillor Coe.
Yeah, a couple of points from me. Firstly, I don't see, unless my eyesight is really, really bad, I know it's bad, but the culture and creativity strategy on there. I see an update on creative cluster, which is not exactly the same thing in my view. So that's the first point. The second one is, if you remember when we did our top 10 priorities way back, we had 3 years worth of top 10 priorities because we couldn't fit everything into the first year. And I just wonder whether it's time to review our top 10 priorities and look at whether we swap some things out or add to them or whatever, because some of the things that were in, you know, years 2 and years 3 were actually quite important, and I know creativity was one of them that didn't make it to the first top 10, but maybe now it's time to bring that forward. So I just wonder if we could perhaps do some work at some point to just refresh our top 10 priorities, and because we're now, you know, 18 months down the track, we've road tested those top 10 priorities. Are they still relevant? Are there any tweaks we'd like to make to them?
Great. And I do want to say, and apologies that this is small, Liz, but in Q1, July to September, we've got the draft supporting strategy, creativity and culture. So that is the one that you're talking about.
Oh, where is
so
it? Sorry?
It's in Q2. It's under development. They're on first page, development and or review of strategies, plans, policies and bylaws, and it's in Q1.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
so we've got that,
That's great.
and
yeah.
we're working on that. And just to note that our creative community is involved in that as well.
Mm-hmm.
To your point about the top 10, I think the top 10 priorities we had year 1, year 2, year 3. Perhaps what we could do is have a look at year 1 and tick off the things that we said we wanted to and whether we've achieved those, and then look at year 2, because, for example, the creativity and culture strategy is in year 2, so it is in the right place. We are focused on it, so I think maybe we can bring that back to the table and just make sure that we've got the right order in there, and that just reminding you of what you said was coming through. So we can definitely do that.
I think just to match them up,
Yep.
alongside
Great
each other
idea.
would be good.
Great.
If we could even include something in the paper on the 16th of May, which kind of marries up the two, that would be awesome. Was that all of your questions, Councillor Coe?
Yep, that's all for me, thank you.
Would you mind just popping your mic off?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Councillor Fravanov.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, thank you, Chris, for bringing this to us and all the work that's gone into this. I've sort of got a similar set of thoughts to what Councillor Coe has just said, and with our top 10 priorities, to me it would be actually quite nice if all these items were actually listed underneath those. So, because so at least you can show what is actually going to be happening in relation to our 10 top priorities.
That's a great suggestion, even, colour coding them or something. So maybe it's another suggestion to bring back for the 16th?
Yes.
The next meeting?
Yes, and so I suppose my other one too, and I suppose because by doing it that way you can see where there's gaps in terms of priorities, and I suppose one of the ones that sticks out for me with my interest is in the environment, and I see that you've got in there about doing this, about developing the strategy, but that is actually it. And there is actually more happening in that space. Well, I'd like to think there's more happening in that space. So that's that. And then I suppose the other, it's about the linkages as well, about how this does actually tie into the two subcommittees and what is actually going to come to them and then feed up into here or into our into our council meeting, so that we've got a plan for all of the committees.
I can just note, so James will be, and I know is working on the work program, which will sit alongside this one. And so maybe what we can do is highlight on the soft program where there's a connection to the SES program. And I know that Sonia is working with Martin, and we can do the same. Making sure though that as we move forward, there's an acknowledgement that sometimes the timing of decisions mean that some things don't quite make it uniformly through that process. So we obviously use things like briefings or special processes to make sure that we can get the right input to those things. But that could be part of what we talk about on the 16th when we're looking to get some approval, so we can point that out.
Thank you for that. And I suppose the other gap to fill is that there may be some items that come to the subcommittees that go straight to council, which is not actually included in this plan.
Correct. So council itself, I'll say at this stage, has, council can make decisions on everything. And I think this was looking at what had been delegated down to this committee and what we would focus on, and then how that paves into the other committees. But your point around some things don't come here that go to council, it will be important that there's alignment to the subcommittees around that as well. So in the background, James, Sonia and I and Sean actually are working together around how the committees work together, and then in the same respect with the risk committee, working with Mark to make sure that we've got the right alignment between what's going where. So that is happening.
Thank you, Chris.
Great questions. Thanks, Jocelyn. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, firstly, congratulations on having a really good strategic analysis of the organisation, what it is we want to do, and the feedback process has been really valuable. I'm now a member of the Revisit Top 10 gang. I think that's a really good idea. As you know, I'm somewhat of a shrinking violet, so when we first went through this process, I sort of hung back and was reluctant to have my view. But now that I've been here for 18 months, I have some fairly well developed views about what should be in our top 10. for instance, the culture and creative strategy, I think, should be the absolute cornerstone of our reason for being as a council.
Sorry, do you have a question, Councillor Wilson?
No, it's just comment. And
Okay,
so,
well, could you
so
could you leave it? Yeah, appreciate that.
the-
But could you leave it for debate, maybe?
well,
Just so we can.
I thought I thought we'd kind
Oh,
of
right, all
intermingle
right.
those.
Yeah, okay.
So I won't speak during debate. This is my point now. But the reason for that is because the impact on our economic development, I think, is huge as well in terms of tourism, in terms of business attraction, the kind of businesses we want to attract, etc., etc. So I think that dovetails with that. I do have a question, and that is, in this process, one of the things that happens is you'll be aware, anybody who's chaired committees will know that sometimes the workload becomes so burdensome that the committee doesn't function as well as it might. And in this, Sophie, obviously, she just loves working, but the workload seems enormous if you want to engage in it fully. And I just wonder about, have we taken the opportunity for chairs to sit down and say how they think this might impact as well? Because it's about making stuff work, right? And it has to go through a democratic process. So how will that work? And we've seen some committees that are quite light, and they are now all committees, not subcommittees anymore. But sometimes their workload seems quite light, and sometimes today's not so bad, but there could, sometimes it's huge. It's bigger than council. So I just wonder if there should be, well, I'm not wondering, I'm going to postulate that there should be conversations with the chairs around what those potential workloads and work streams might be.
I'll pick up on 2 points. One, your comments about the connection of tourism and economic development to that creative and culture strategy, we have definitely picked up on the feedback that you've given us. We have the EDKB about to stand up a creative cluster actually to help to inform that picture and view, with the tourism board linked to that. So I was just talking to Neil yesterday, and we'll be giving you some more details on that. So I just want to make sure we've heard you. That's coming. It is on the table, and it's in this agenda to be coming through. Secondly, around workloads, absolutely. So I think the proposal is that we actually need to get on the table what we are thinking about for the relative committees so that we can make sure we've got the right balance. And so SOF just happened to have come out first to go, hey, here's what we've got on the go now. It may be that some of the things you're interested in, you can see in another committee, or that a decision's coming through later, or it might be going to council. So that will sort of flush through in the next month. But totally taken on board the relative workloads, because we don't want some committees to be overwhelmed and others to effectively have nothing. So really great points.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Halliday, and then we'll look for someone to move the recommendation.
And look, I've got a feeling it's actually not going to tie into this particular document, but we've got a review for Te Whakaminanga or Kapititu at some point. Is that under the council work stream, or is it under this work stream, or where does that sort of thing sit?
So the chair of that committee will be working with HARA on a similar approach for a work program for the year. And I know that there have been discussions underway. So the timing of that, I'm not completely sure of, but we, as we go through this process, are identifying with HARA and that chair key things that need to go to that forum as well. So there will be a connection across and between things, but there will be also a priority made around, for example, not everything will go to that committee. Mm-hmm. It'll be on the balance of what our iwi partners have agreed are things that they'd like to see coming. Because obviously these meetings are not monthly like SOF and council are, so we're having to pick and choose what goes where essentially.
Lovely, thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there someone who would like to move the recommendation on page 33? Councillor Coe, seconded Councillor Wilson. Any debate? All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you, Chris. Now we're moving on to item 9, reports. 9.1, LGFA draft statement of intent 2024 to... How long do we think this one will take? Do people have a lot of questions about the statement of intent? Because it could take 10 minutes, no? No, let's do this now. Let's do this now and then see how we go. Because then that might encourage people to be nice and quick. Okay, so welcome, Jing, and thank you for waiting for so long. To bring this to us. So this is the Statement of Intent 24-27 and the 23 to 24 half-year report. And Mark as well, welcome to the table. And we'll pass, we don't have any externals, I don't believe.
No.
Yeah, okay, cool. Pass it, Jing. Thank you.
Is it on? Molena, thanks, Madam Chair. So unfortunately, Andrew Mitchell from LGFA can't make the meeting this morning, but he will be here for the final State of Intent and the full financial year report. So this is for the draft Statement of Intent and their half-yearly report to the 31st of December. I'll just take the report as received and noted, and I can take questions.
Awesome.
Before that, I might say, because we had the Standard & Poor Global Ratings is still rating LGFA as AA+, which is a very strong credit rating, as the same as the New Zealand government, the Crown. And so they're continuously delivering values for the councils as they are deemed as CCOs, and we are one of the shareholders of the LGFA. The focuses they have been in the last year or so is the climate action loan and the green, social and a sustainable loan. And if the council are aware that we got our climate action loan approved August last year, which means all the loans we drew 9 months before that, which was $50 million, and all the loans we draw after that to now is $225 million. We received 2 basis points on interest expense. So it does give us a lot of benefit to join those loans. And we're also now looking at a possibility to apply for the Green, Social and Sustainable loan for the Waikana Library.
Awesome. Cool. Great. That's exciting. Okay, any questions? There do not appear to be any. Is there someone who would like to move the recommendations?
Yeah, I had a question actually.
Oh, yeah, the question.
Yeah, just around the Waikanae Library. So what would be, obviously, we wouldn't be doing it if there wasn't an advantage, but what is the advantage in dollar terms, do you know?
It's the 0.05% interest. So if we have a $10 million project, we will receive 50,000 interest expense. So that's what our interest savings for the project.
Oh, so 50,000 savings. Yeah.
If it's a $10 million project, yes.
Or 13. Sorry.
Just a
saying.
general rule of thumb. So your GSS loans have to be for a term longer than 1 year. So it's as Jing has said, it's a discount of 5 basis points, which for every $5 million, it's a $25,000 reduction in interest per annum.
Right, and we were always debt funding that anyway, right? Yeah. And last question for me is the dividend from LGFA, our dividend, do we treat that as a reinvestment back into LGFA?
We treat it as income. They actually do pay dividends. It's just under 10,000 each year at the moment. Yep.
And is there a facility? This is coming from a person who had a hand in helping draft the LGFA back in the day. Is there a facility for us to increase our shareholding in LGFA?
Not I'm aware of.
So there's no trading between shareholders of that? Because I have heard about councils who, if you want to shed some assets for cash, that shares is one of the ways that you could do that, like Auckland City Council, for instance. So at one point it was written into a proposal that councils would actually be able to do that, but councils had to have first right of purchase, other shareholders.
Yeah, so through you, Madam Chair. So we're as you've seen in the report, we're a participating borrowing council, so we're a shareholder. We have share capital at the moment of 200,000. We've only paid 100,000 of that. If the LGFA wanted to issue more capital, then as a borrowing shareholding council, we would have the option of increasing our shareholding capital. But at this stage, the only way that we can increase our shareholding is if they actually went direct to shareholders and wanted to issue the share capital. At this stage, they have no need to do that. So it's, at the moment, no, but they can do that in the future.
Great, thank you, Mark. Last question, Councillor Halliday.
Yeah, look, mine's a little bit off topic on this one, apologies. But I've had some questions recently about the corporate structure that we sit within council. As such, some people have said that we're a corporation that sits under various things. What is the structure of KCDC? I mean, as an operational business, are we structured like a corporation? Do we sit within legislation and just work in that space? I'm actually not that sure.
So I think the question is, what is the structure of a council?
Yeah.
So we're a public benefit entity.
Public benefit entity.
A PBE. So we're not a company. We're deemed to be a public benefit entity.
Public benefit entity. Okay, that's natural.
I do just want to add to that is obviously the greatest portion of our funding is rates, and I think some of the questions that might have come up might have been the connection to central government and international forums or organisations. There is no formal link to those things. And in our structure, as it sits, we don't sit under those things.
Just through you, Madam Chair, just for the benefit of the committee. So there is more information about what structure and what type of organisation we have in our accounting policies and our annual report. So if you are faced with that question in the public, please refer them to the annual report or contact myself and Jing, and we can provide the information to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Halliday. Cool, so we've got 2 recommendations on page 37. Moved Councillor Wilson, seconded Deputy Mayor Kirby. Any debate? No, all those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Now thank you, Jing. Thank you, Mark. Sorry, one more paper to go. Thanks so much. Appreciate that. I don't imagine there are too many questions around contracts under delegated authority, so let's just see if we can move to item 9.2. Who's presenting? Sean. Sean, do you want to just take the paper as read? No. All right, Sean, over to you.
Happy to answer any questions. There's one contract.
Okay,
Becca's
there's a question.
Paikakariki seawall, completing the design work on the replacement wall down there. Previous contractor was Tonkin & Taylor, and they weren't actually providing, and they were significantly behind schedule in terms of delivery. So we've exited them from the work, and Becca's will finishing the design work off, and Becca's have designed the Raumati seawall as well, so they're very familiar with that particular design, and a lot more cost effective in terms of delivery as well.
Great, thank you, Sean. Councillor Halliday.
I'll be brief. I only have 18 questions, and no, just one, thanks. Look, the last contract there talked to a resource consent processing supplier panel, as such, and I was just curious to know what that was.
Oh, Jane.
It's a contract was awarded to 4 suppliers, Foresights Consulting and Insight Wellington, LB Urban. Just don't worry, just getting an
so that is basically picking up on work volume overflow from our resource consents team.
Oh, okay.
So those are all consultants that provide consultancy advice and consent planning. So we get them to process applications if they are obviously more than we can deal with, and we need to meet our statutory timeframes. So James has a contract in place that gives them that option.
Obviously similar to the one above building consents, but that's from the resource consent space. Cool. That's
Yeah, so workload-wise, they can then just issue those externally as and when they come up, rather than having to tender out each one in terms of the commissioning side of it.
Nope, lovely, thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Cofford.
Oh, thanks, Madam Chair. Sean, just a quick one. These are consultants preparing documentation for tenders, and is the job for the seawall being tendered, or did it? Sorry, I think you alerted to that a couple of months ago, didn't you? That it had gone to a contractor already, or?
Yeah. So what we're doing. So this is the design work, and we engaged with Mills Albert to provide sort of early contractor engagement to inform the design. So what we'll often do is get a contractor on board to make sure that what we're designing from a methodology point of view is practical, and you can build it, and it can also save you some money in terms of construction. But at the moment we haven't confirmed the procurement process for the wall. But one option is obviously to publicly tender it, and but we have previously talked about a 5, 6, 7 staged approach to delivery, and you could also link that to a contract over a fixed period of time that has a requirement every year to do a certain amount of work during the summer season. So that's the sort of thing we'd be looking at for Paikākāriki and possibly Raumati as well.
Yeah. So it's sort of a design build with a performance clause attached to it, sort of thing. Oh, so you said it was publicly tendered, but
no, it hasn't been tendered. No.
Okay.
This isn't about building it. This is just the design.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
We're yet to do the construction tender.
Councillor Pravanov.
Yeah, thank you. So I had exactly the same question as Councillor Halliday in relation to the supply panel. And so for that one and for the one above that, I see that there's a number of companies that have been awarded those contracts. My question is, what checks and balances are in place so that they are fully aware of our rules and regulations? So yeah, what are the checks and balances to show that they're actually being followed when these applications are being considered?
I don't know the exact detail of the contract, but I assume it has a requirement in there to meet the relevant legislation. I mean, it's the RMA, the district plan. Those are reasonably readily available documents that they have to comply with. There's likely to be some from a contract point of view. There'll be deliverables in terms of timing and things like that. But yeah, I don't know the details of the engagement.
Yeah, I
mean,
suppose
that's not one of the contracts that we're actually talking about today.
Because I suppose I know that, in terms of value for money, for example, our district plan, it's a weighty document and it takes a lot of interpreting, and if spread it over 4 companies, that's 4 sets of eyes that are having to learn it or understand it, and economy, and there's probably some inefficiencies in there. If I could just.
Well, I would hope they're not all doing the same application.
I know, but
4 times, but you would assume that these consultants provide these services to external developers when they submit an application, so that they are experts in that field. So processing it and providing advice back is really part of the same group of skills I would expect from a planning point of view. You'd need to be well versed in the district plan to be putting an application in, as well as assessing an application. So.
Okay, thank you. So my other question relates to the Takatai Kapiti Jacobs work. So what actually is that contract for? The second one, because I know that they were initially contracted to do.
What we're looking at right now, Jocelyn, is just all of the supporting information which kind of lead to the recommendation around one contract, except an undelegated authority, noting that that is the contract for Becca for the seawall, Paikākāriki seawall. So I think
I'm
maybe
looking at
that
on table 74. Have I jumped the gun? Have I?
I think there's an attachment or appendices
On page
that actually
74.
we always provide a running total of summary of those contracts. All of them have previously been to this committee for noting, and I have been involved in conversations with most of them.
So it's on the page, so I assume that we can ask a question seeing it's actually been tabled, so I'd be interested to know.
I think it was provided as background to the paper, just to show what had previously been discussed. And then today's recommendation was the contract accepted under delegated authority between 1st of October and 31st of March. If that's helpful.
Background paper.
Yeah, I think it's just been included as background information.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pavanov. Last question, Councillor Wilson.
Yep. Two questions actually. One is so Tonkin and Taylor, was that kind of by agreement with Tonkin Taylor, or did you go up and wave a big stick at them and go, you bastard?
Well, they agreed that they wouldn't be getting any more work, I guess, was the extent of it.
Yeah. No, I was just wondering,
Yes.
I mean, it wasn't acrimonious?
No,
We're
so
gonna
it was
see you
mutually,
in court on a
no,
situation?
it was an acceptance on their part that they weren't resourced to deliver, and that was one of the reasons why they had been so late in providing us with the work we needed to get done, and so yeah, it was again, it was a mutual agreed outcome.
Yeah, you could see how they'd be well overstretched. They probably put all their resources into the Waikanae clip-on, which they're involved in. I just wondered also, like with where there's fast-track applications, so there effectively isn't a resource consent, certainly not through us. This is a little bit of an aside, but I just wondered, generally speaking, with when there are resource consents, like when there are fast-track applications, like Otaki Racecourse, for instance, so if there's a breach or a perceived breach, this goes back to the stuff we were talking about
I
earlier.
think, can we park this?
No, it's nearly
I
nearly
think there's
done.
consensus
Really
that we
quick.
should park it.
Oh,
Sorry,
no,
Councillor
I
Wilson.
just wondered, do we have any say? That's all.
Sorry, the WSP Opus are doing the clip-on bridge, just for information, not Tonkin and Taylor and Waikanae. A breach in what sort of breach? What
So
do
if
you mean
there
by
was
a breach?
when you have a normal
Is
resource
this a
consent,
conversation that maybe you both could take offline?
I will talk about. Okay,
Okay.
that's cool. Yep.
Oh, I think, okay, no, we're taking that offline. Thanks,
Got the
Councillor
resource
Wilson.
consent guy here. He's the man to talk to.
And to Councillor Halliday. Sorry, Nigel, could you push your microphone? Could you turn your microphone off, Nigel? Councillor Halliday.
Just referencing Nigel's note, just kidding. The contract numbers here are 2022/C508 as an example. Do these sit in public domain as such? They're all sensitive.
Yes and no.
Yeah,
We have
I'll
a
just
contract
checking.
register, and finance keep a copy.
Yep.
We have a copy operationally for delivery, and then the contractor keeps a copy, but they're not public available because most of them have got scheduled rates and costs and a whole lot of stuff in
Fair
them.
enough. No, I was just curious if there was. I was just going to look them up, but if there's not, that's fine. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sean. No other questions. I think Councillor Warwick, did you want to move? Yeah, seconded. Councillor Coe, any debate? I don't think there's been any debate all day. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Great, thank you, Sean. Okay, so no public excluded items on our agenda, and I will close us with a karakia. Kia tau ngā manaakitanga ki runga i a tātou katoa, kia hua ai te makihikihi, e ki ana, kia toi te kupu, kia toi te reo, kia toi te wairua, kia tau te mauri, ki roto i a mātou mahi katoa i tēnei rā, haumi e hui e tai ki e. Great, thank you. And now we can have our tea break. Well, not break, but oh, just one thing to mention. Sorry, before people leave. Oh, the live stream's not turned off. Just one brief